We continue now at the top of Daf Yud Zayin Amud Aleph and Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 17a. On the previous Amud, Rabbah suggested that we should say if an onein does the avoda by a carbon sibur, it should be accepted. That carbon should be kosher based on a kal v'chomer, even though that would go against the general sense of the psukim. And the Gemara responded, if you're going to make a kal v'chomer like that, there are a number of kal v'chomers that you can make that would go against the general sense of the psukim. And so the Gemara now continues and says, Ela ikala mifrachachi v'ikala mifrachachi. One can refute this way, one can refute that way. Kol chada v'chada tegu b'duchta. Each halacha should stand in its place. Rashi explains, the ikal mifrachachi yesh lodun v'yesh lahachlef. You could switch things around based on kal v'chomers. V'lo neida eza nidrosh. We don't know which kal v'chomer exactly we should make. Hilkach kol chada tegu b'duchta. Therefore, each halacha should stay in its place. Kichsi v'asa stam. The way it's written, it should be understood in the plain meaning to say keshehutra aninos l'kohen gadol. When it says that aninos, for example, is permitted by a kohen gadol, stam bein b'yachid bein b'tzibur hutra. We understand across the board it's going to be permitted whether privately or whether by a communal carbon. Uchesh and nesra lehedyot, and when it's forbidden for a regular kohen, we're going to understand bein b'yachid bein b'tzibur nesra. That's true whether by a private carbon or whether by a communal. Uchesh hutra tumma b'tzibur hutra, and when we say that tumma is allowed b'tzibur, we're going to say it's permitted afla kohen hedyot, even for a regular kohen. Uchesh and nesra b'carbon yachid, and when we say that tumma is prohibited by a carbon yachid, nesra afla kohen gadol, it will be prohibited even for a kohen gadol. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Tvul Yom, let's say somebody who immersed that day, but he's not completely pure. He's waiting for the end of the day. Let's say he participates in the avoda of the carbon, so then the carbon is disqualified. And the Gemara says, Menolan, from where do we know this? The Tanya, because we learned in a Brisa, Rabbi Simoy Omer, Rabbi Simoy says, Remez l'Tvul Yom, a hint by a Tvul Yom, Shem Avad, that if he does the avoda in the Beis HaMikdash, Chilal, that profanes the avoda minayin. From where do we know that? Talmud Lomer, the Pasuk says, Kedoshim Yiyu v'lo yichalu. It says, be holy, and you shouldn't desecrate, you shouldn't profane. Im eino inyan l'tameh. Now, if we don't need to apply that Pasuk to a tameh person who does avoda in the Beis HaMikdash, the nafek mi v'yinazru, because we already learned that out from the Pasuk of v'yinazru. So teneu inyan l'tvul yom, so we should apply it to tvul yom, and that becomes the source. And Rashi explains, Kedoshim Yu, they should be holy. Gabe Tumma Ksiv Be'emor V'lo Yechalu. This pasuk is written in the context of Tumma. Ki es Ishay Hashem Lechem Bechilul Kodshim Hakosim Medaber. Again, we're talking about a situation of profaning Kodshim. The Nafkalei Mi V'yinazru. And again, we already learned out a Tameh person from V'yinazru. Techsib Be'chilul, it already says Chilul over there. And so therefore, again, we apply it to a Tvul Yom. But the Gemara continues and asks, Ema, why don't we say, Teneyu inyan l'koreach karcha, or l'mashches pazakin? Why don't we say that this pasuk of Kedoshim Yu v'lo yichalu is actually applying to koreach karcha, that's one who makes a bald spot, and mashches pazakin is somebody who destroys the corners of the beard, meaning someone like that does the avod in the Beis HaMikdash. So we'll say if a kohen who's koreach karcha, mashches pazakin, that avod is going to be disqualified. Rashi explains, V'nema teneyu inyan deminayu solik, because that was the topic right before this pasuk of Kedoshim Yu v'lo yichalalu. It says lo yikrachu karcha. It says they shouldn't make a bald spot. V'samach lei Kedoshim Yu, and right next to that it says Kedoshim Yu. And the Gemara continues and answers, Tvul Yom dim avad b'misa minolan. By a Tvul Yom, how do we know that if the Tvul Yom does the avoda that the punishment is death? We know that the Gomar chilul mitruma. We know that as a gzer shava chilul from truma. The pasul b'truma machal avoda. And so we learn out as follows: one who is pasul to have truma, that person profanes the avoda. The low pasul b'truma, one who's not pasul by truma, lo machal avoda, does not profane the avoda. And Rashi explains, Tvul Yom dim avad b'misa, by a Tvul Yom, if he does the avoda, the punishment is misa. Shinuyahu, this is an answer. Kilomar, what the Gemara means to say is as follows: Lo matzis lemisni teneu inyan lekoreach karcha. You can't say that the pasuk Kedoshim Yu is talking about koreach karcha. The misa gabe Tvul Yom sha'avad, because the idea, the fact that misa applies by a Tvul Yom who does the avoda, Yalfinan la b'Sanhedrin be'elu hein hanisrafin v'gamar chilul chil mitruma. That we happen to learn out. It's a gzer shava chilul from truma in Meseches Sanhedrin. That's where we learn this out. Umechilul dahai kro yolaflan. It's actually learned out from the chilul in this pasuk. Nemar kan chilul. It says over here chilul. V'nemar b'tamei u'tvul yom sha'achlu truma. And it also says by someone who's tamei or someone who's a tvul yom who eats truma chilul. It also says the same word chilul. Tvul, and it says over there, Umesubo ki yechalalu. It says Umesubo that they're going to die, ki yechalalu. And so we learn out Malahalon b'misa, just like over there, by Truma, the punishment is Misa, so too over here, by doing the Avoda, the punishment is Misa. And so the Gemara is saying, V'hilkach, therefore, Hoel v'hai krol gzeir shava mitruma asa, since this pasuk is used for gzeir shava from Truma, v'lo mefaresh bei b'mai koin, it doesn't explain clearly what the context of this pasuk is talking about. Lo teteneyu inyan ella l'psulun l'truma. We should assume that it applies to people who are disqualified from Truma. The alfinan minei the pasuk b'truma mechel machel avoda. We'll learn out that one who's pasuk in Truma, that person will be machel the avoda, that person will profane the avoda. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabba says, Lamali the kasav rachmana tamei utvul yom mechusar kippurim. Why does the pasuk have to write tamei and tvul yom and mechusar kippurim? Meaning that in all of those cases, if a tamei or tvul yom or mechusar kippurim does the avoda, that the avoda is disqualified, why write it in all of those cases? Essentially, they're all versions of tumah. A person who's tamei is obviously tamei. A tvul yom is somebody who immersed but is still waiting for the end of the day to be totally pure. And a mechusar kippurim is somebody who's still waiting to bring the atonement, waiting to bring the carbon to be totally pure. And so again, they're all essentially versions of tumah. Why do we need a pasuk for all of them? And the Gemara continues and answers, Strichi, it's necessary. The cause of Rachmana Tameh, if the pasuk wrote that a Tameh person, then the avod is disqualified, Shekain Metame, so a Tameh person is stricter because he can be Metame others. And the Gemara continues, B'tvul Yom, let's say the Torah wrote it by a Tvul Yom, so Mechusar Kippurim lo asi mineh, you couldn't learn a Mechusar Kippurim from a Tvul Yom, Shekain Pasal B'truma, because a Tvul Yom is Pasal in Truma, Tvul Yom cannot have Truma, that's not true by a Mechusar Kippurim. And by Mechusar Kippurim, let's say the Pasuk only wrote it by Mechusar Kippurim, Tvul Yom lo asi mineh, you wouldn't be able to learn Tvul Yom from Mechusar Kippurim, Shekain Mechusar Ma'isa, because a Mechusar Kippurim has to actually do something, has to actually still bring a carbon in order to be completely pure. It's full yom, it happens automatically at the end of the day. And the Gemara continues, Mechada lo asi, so you can't learn out from one of them. You can't just write it by one of them and learn out the other. But teisi chada mitarti, but why can't we learn out one from the combination of two of them? And the Gemara says, Behailo lichtov, so which one should we not write? Behailo lichtov rachmana, which one should the pasuk not write this halacha? Again, that there's a disqualification by the avoda. Lo lichtov b'mechusar kippurim, let's say the pasuk wouldn't write it by mechusar kippurim, v'teise mehanach, and then we'll learn it out from the combination of tamei and tvul yom, but malahanach shekain psulim b'truma, but tamei and tvul yom are both disqualified from truma. That's not true by mechusar kippurim, as we just said above. Ella rather, lo lichtov rachmana b'tvul yom, let the pasuk not write it by tvul yom, v'teise mehanach, and then you can learn it out from the combination of tamei and mechusar kippurim. Demai paracht, because what are you going to say? What are you going to ask to refute that derivation? Malahanach shekain mechusarim ma'isa, you'll say that both of those are mechusar ma'isa, there has to be an action in order to make them pure. But sof, but still at the end, klisha la tumasa, the tumah is weaker. And Rashi explains, Lamali the kasav rachmana tamei u'tvul yom v'chulu. Why does the pasuk have to write tamei and tvul yom and mechusar kippurim? And Rashi says that tamei lo kami boile. The Gemara is not really asking about tamei. The lav kasav tamei, had the Torah not written tamei, lo have osilon chad minayu shechal avoda, we wouldn't learn the other ones that the avoda is disqualified. The tvul yom b'meino inyan l'tamei alfinan, because tvul yom, that's learned through an meino inyan by tamei. Since it already said tamei once, why say it a second time? So we apply it to tvul yom. V'lo have a kasav tamei b'v'yinazru, had the pasuk not written tamei from v'yinazru, have yokimna l'kedoshim yu b'tamei, so we would have said kedoshim yu is talking about tamei. The reason we say kedoshim yu is talking about tvul yom is because we already have a pasuk for tamei from v'yinazru. V'chein mechusar kippurim nami, and the same is true by mechusar kippurim. Lo kasav b'chilul, it doesn't say chilul. Elami de ikri tamei yalfina leila kamon. It's only because it's referred to as tamei. That's how we're going to learn it on. That's how we're going to learn it out later on. V'chimi boy leila Rava. So Rava's real question is tvul yom and mechusar kippurim coming by. He's asking, why do we need psukim by both tvul yom and mechusar kippurim? But mechusar kippurim tvul yom lo asi minei, and the Gemara said that you can't learn out tvul yom from mechusar kippurim shekain mechusar ma'isa, because by mechusar kippurim an action still has to be taken, which is havoas carbon. You still have to bring the carbon. Tomer b'tvul yom she'eino mechusar, when it comes to tvul yom, it's not mechusar ma'isa. No action has to happen. It's just the end of the day is the end of the purification. Havoas carbon Karban, you don't have that Maisa of Havas Karban by Tvul Yom, V'shimsha Memela Arva, and the sun is going to set on its own, it's going to happen automatically, and so therefore, again, that's why Mechusar Kippurim is Mechusar Maisa, and that is not true by Tvul Yom. And Rashi again notes, B'tamei lekel meimar to lo asya minay. Now you can't say that Tamei is not learned out from there. To ha'iyu nami mechusar tefillah, because Tamei actually is also mechusar, is also lacking something, because the person needs to immerse. And so really Tamei could actually be learned out from mechusar kippurim. V'yo de Tamei lo kami boile. And furthermore, like Rashi just said above, we're not even asking the question about Tamei. Mi de lo kamar b'seifa de milsa, because we don't say at the end, at the conclusion over here, we don't say lo lichtov Tamei, don't write Tamei. The Gemara never suggests that. V'teisei mehanech. The Gemara never says don't write Tamei, and that will be learned out from the others. Because for that there would have been no answer. And then the Gemara said Klisha le Tomaso. The Gemara said that you can't learn from Mechusar Kippurim because that is a Klisha le Tomaso, and that is a weaker kind of Tumah. And we will note over here that Rashi has the girsa of Tomaso, not like our Gemara Tomason. It's in singular because it's only referring to Mechusar Kippurim. As Rashi says, the Mechusar Kippurim. A Mechusar Kippurim has a weak kind of Tumah. Sharei Harav Shimsho, because the sun already set, the person is almost pure. All he has left now is to bring the atonement, to bring the Karban. And again, the refutation was you can't learn out Tvul Yom from Mechusar Kippurim and Tameh, because those are both Mechusar Maisa. And so Rashi now says, V'suleka Pircha de Mahatzad. But now you can't really refute this and say that they're both Mechusar Maisa, because one of them is as if it's not Mechusar Maisa. Since it's such a weak Tumah by Mechusar Kippurim, that's already considered as if it's not Mechusar Maisa, and that's why you should be able to learn out Tvul Yom from the others. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Zayin Amid Beis.